First of all, I want to say, Jim, I really appreciate you, coming on to the Glory Game NFL podcast. It's great to have you on. I'm a huge fan, been a lifelong friend. I had a chance to, fortunately play ball for you back in 1985 on the NCAA team, and it was one of the things that changed my life. It made me a different person, and I want to thank you for that. But I want to welcome you to the show. Thank you
Well,
for
that's
joining me.
that's nice of you to say, John. You were number 8, right?
Yes, I was.
Okay. See, I remember.
You
And
do.
you were center fielder.
I played center. I played short. I played mainly
Okay.
short, but
Didn't you crash into fences chasing balls?
I did a few times. Hey, that's the way
I
you got
just
to
I
play.
just want people to know what kind of ball player, what kind of athlete we're dealing with here. Number 8, Aaron Rodgers, played center fielder. Always wanted to play shortstop. I don't know how much you played shortstop. I just remember you as a center fielder who crashed into walls chasing down balls, and I always appreciated you, John.
I appreciate you. Hey,
Power speed guy.
you played for you play for your coach.
Yeah,
That's how
thanks.
it is. I want to show you this real quick too before we really get into it. I still have it.
Wow, nice. Nice.
Still appreciate it. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
uh that's a big
See, you
time
shouldn't
in
have
the
had the
in the
year.
collection.
You shouldn't have had the year on there, John. Now everyone knows we're just two old guys.
What we're gonna have to do, I'll have to edit it out a little bit.
All right.
We'll get the 8 in there, but we'll take off the oh no, we'll just put the 19 in there.
Okay.
We'll make it a little later. So the first thing I want to start with is you growing up, born in Chicago. Tell us about those days and how a young Jim Wexell got started in a windy city.
Okay. Well, you're not going to get much out of that because I was born there and my father was killed when he was 23. He was a pedestrian walking his dog. And so my mother remarried a year or two later and she was 18. And we moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana. And we visited Chicago. All the family was there. So, I mean, I've watched the extremes. I saw a no-hitter in Chicago at Wrigley Field when I was 8 years old. Kenny Holtzman.
Nice.
It was during the 1969 season when they had that huge lead over the Mets, and then someone put a black cat on the field, and it all collapsed. And I saw the Bears at Soldier Field on a really brutally cold day. My grandfather took me. It was the day that uh, they lost 24-7. Their score was a defensive touchdown by Todd Bell. They set a record, a franchise record for fewest offensive yards gained in a game. It was a franchise record. So it was the worst. I might have seen the best Cubs game and the worst Bears game of all time. And I was a big fan of the city of Chicago. Growing up in Fort Wayne, I did not know I was growing up with Rod Woodson at the time. So
That's
uh,
great.
yeah. So and then it was Buffalo, New York, and then Pittsburgh. And I was in eighth grade when I moved to Pittsburgh. So I've been raised in Pittsburgh. It was difficult coming here about in the middle of the dynasty when my team, the Bears, I don't know how bad they were. I can't remember the record. They did lose the coin flip to the Steelers for Terry Bradshaw. They were both 1 and
Right,
13,
right.
and and they were so bad they even lost the coin flip. And the Steelers got Terry Bradshaw. I moved here, and when you're a kid and your team is the Bears and they're getting killed, and your friends at school are humiliating you, you start to root against the Steelers. And so I rooted against them through the 70s.
Right.
This is a horrible thing to look back on. And then the Bears won the Super Bowl in '85. I went back to Chicago, roamed on Rush Street. I was grown man by then. I don't know, 20 something years old. And and then they fired Ditka about 93. And in 95, I started covering the Steelers. And I really grew to respect this franchise. Dan Rooney. I was a big fan of Dan Rooney. He was a fan of mine. I was told he brought my name up in a meeting and wanted to hire me. He was talked out of it by the marketing director. And I still
Great
have
story.
great respect for Dan Rooney. He always liked me. I'm an Irish German Catholic, same as the Rooneys, with a bit of a temper, same as the Rooneys. So I just they got wise and hired a lawyer. Art too was raised a lawyer to kind of temper all of that temper, and they kind of changed a little bit, but they're intelligent, they're smart, and I still have a lot of respect for the Rooney family. A lot of, young Dan is a scout. I'm a friend of his, and I just have a lot of friends in the organization, and I don't even think about the Bears anymore at all. You really outgrow that stuff. At least I do. Now I know a
Right,
lot of
right.
Steeler fans that haven't, but and with good
That's right.
reason.
It's tough. It's
Yeah,
tough.
I even outgrew my Cubs fanaticism for the White Sox, which you're never supposed to do. But I found out I had family that played for the White Sox, and my father's family, who I didn't get to know until I got older, a big White Sox people worked at Comiskey Park, and so
Right.
I'm actually a White Sox fan now. Yeah, so not that I even know what their record is. I actually pay more attention to the Pirates. I'm rooting for the Pirates more. But if the White
Right.
Sox become good again, I'll be there.
You'll be there. Yeah. That's amazing to go from one storied franchise, in Chicago and then to the we believe is the ultimate storied franchise here in Pittsburgh. It's really a
I
great
love
transition.
I love reading the history of all this, George Hallis, and there's just a lot of good stuff. The Bears sprung up out of the Ohio League. That's the forerunner to the NFL. There were a lot of Ohio towns that had NFL pre-NFL franchises, and they grew.
Right.
They wanted to include Pittsburgh, but they had the blue laws. You couldn't play, you couldn't compete on Sundays, you couldn't entertain, you really couldn't do much on Sundays. So it was, I don't want to say puritanical, more Quaker, but they enforced those blue laws, so they couldn't get a Western PA franchise. They tried. They did expand into Chicago, the Decatur Staleys in 1920. The NFL was formed, and Hallis
Right.
was one of them, and so many Ohio teams too, and into Michigan and around the and in 1926, the semi-pro teams in Pittsburgh could play on Sundays as the law, the cops would wink at them,
Right.
let them get away with it. It wasn't hurting anything. But in 1926, for whatever reason, they cracked down on it. And Rooney's semi-pro team, the Hope Harveys, was really good. They went to East or Steubenville. Yeah, they went to Steubenville. I believe that was where they went for 1926 to play their games. And they got an exhibition with the Canton Bulldogs, Jim Thorpe's team. Jim Thorpe was a
Yep.
39-year-old two-way player, and they played exhibitions to make money, and they played the Hope Harveys. And Thorpe was hoping to get in and out of the game. Let's put these guys away so I don't have to play much here. But the Rooney's team, the Hope Harveys, were so tough that Canton had to. They won 3-0, and Thorpe had to play every snap at 39 years old. But
Right.
Rooney's team caught the attention of the NFL. They always wanted to go into Pittsburgh, but they identified the team they wanted to deal with. Art Rooney was a great player, and he was a halfback. He was a thin kid, but he was a Golden Gloves boxer. He was a great baseball player. He loved baseball, just loved baseball. Honus Wagner was his idol, and that's why he named the Steelers the Pirates originally. But that
Great
was
story.
when the NFL caught the attention of Rooney, and when they finally did do away with the blue laws, they went after Rooney's team, and he bought in, and that was the start of it. But it started with that 1926 game against Jim Thorpe's team that really was the key game, because there were a lot of semi-pro teams in Pittsburgh that were strong. Rooney's was the strongest, best managed. He was a great manager along with a
Right.
great player. Yeah.
You
Sorry
know,
for all
that's
that. I didn't know if that's what you wanted today or not, John.
no, no, that's great. This
Okay.
is about, the history of the team and you starting out as a journalist. I remember the days of Standard Observer back in Irwin,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
we were playing ball and everything. Tell us about those days and how you came up because that was kind of like your formative years, to get you
Okay.
to
Well,
the place where you are
yeah,
now.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, no.
Um, I don't know how much your fan base is going to be interested in this, but I I got into I was at Robert Morris. I transferred from Clarion to Robert Morris and was in a business writing class, learning about computers because that's where all the money was. Like a kid now
Right,
should go into AI. A kid then was going into COBOL and learning how to write programming. And I had a business writing class at Robert Morris, and we had to read a book called something about the grain embargo between Russia and the USA. And
right.
I couldn't read it. It was terrible. I was so bored. And then we had to write a paper on it. And we didn't have Google back in those days. So I wrote a really, really bad paper, handed it in. And the teacher the next day, the professor said, class, this was the worst writing assignment I've ever I've ever gotten back from all of you. And so I'm glad it wasn't just me. It was the whole class. He goes, I know this is a dry subject, but write about whatever you want tonight. Please, I got to teach you guys how to write. So I wrote about Cool Papa Bell. And the next day, the old thing about Cool Papa Bell, in the Negro Leagues, he was so fast that he could turn off the light switch, get into bed under the covers before the room got dark. That's how fast he was.
That's
And the
great.
teacher loved that.
Right.
He said, much better class, much better. There was one in particular that I really loved, and he had copies for everybody. He goes, I'm handing this out to all of my students in all my classes. And he said, this is a chocolate chip cookie packed full of chocolate chips. So that's always been my goal as a writer, to get many chocolate chips into a chocolate chip cookie as I could. So that
Great.
influenced me to become a writer. So I transferred to Pitt Greensburg and got into English writing. And the Standard Observer hired me to write, be a stringer, cover high school ball. And he usually gave me York. And you being in the area, you know that nobody cares about York football and all that, right?
Right.
But
That's
that was
right.
where my start was. And the second year I was starting to, no, after the football season, basketball season was starting. And I coached you guys. I knew all you guys from the summer. And Norwin's basketball team was hosting a holiday tournament. He said, how'd you like to cover Norwin? I'm like, yeah, how'd I like to cover Notre Dame? How'd I like to cover the Steelers? Yeah, I'll cover Norwin. It was the biggest school in our readership.
Right.
And that's where I went. That's where you went. I coached
Right.
all the kids. I knew all the kids, and they were sophomores coming in, Rasps and Jeff Schrump and Doug Jackson. I knew all the basketball players. I knew their
Right.
nicknames,
Right.
and they were all good athletes. And I was surprised they were all
Sure.
starting. I think he started five sophomores to start the season. And my plan, well, I was going to Colorado with a buddy after I graduated in Christmas time. So anyway, I wrote up that game. He knew I was in English writing and not. Vic Ketchman was a great writer. Football
Oh
junkies
yeah,
out there
sure.
know the name. Yeah.
Sure.
And so he
Great
said,
writer.
I don't want any of that English writing shit. I want journalism. Who, what, where, why, none of your English writing crap. So it was my last story. I was leaving for Colorado after I graduated from Pitt Greensburg. And so I let it all hang out. I knew all the kids. I used all their nicknames, wrote how good these guys are going to be, and they won the game. Next day, I got a call, Jim, I want to hire you full time. So that's how I got into it, John,
It's
because of
amazing.
you guys.
That's an amazing story. And
Yeah.
you tie that writing, that style, and you talk about that particular, piece to get you to that point. You still do that type of journalism today, and that's why I love reading, the things that you do because I think it's true. I think it's really, something that people appreciate, from a fan's perspective. Hey, we have a guy here that not only understands, the organization and the things that are going on, but you put it in a perspective that the people can really understand, and then we look at it as truth. I love that you do that. I really do.
Well, thank you. I try to tell the truth. That's number one. Number two, I tell you, I still lean on English writing principles. in our journalism at Pitt Greensburg, we were taught Judy Vollmer was the head of the newspaper, and she was a award-winning poet. So she cared about the writing, and she wanted me to develop columns, and and we were given books to read by Hunter Thompson. The new I forget the new journalism from the '60s and '70s that wasn't so much who, what, where, why. I mean, she wanted you to be creative. And so I think I've carried that with me, and it's helped me in books and magazines. I don't know that it's helped me in my reports and my reporting. I hope it has, but I have still taken that English writing as opposed to journalism. From Pitt taught that, and I took a class in sports writing at Pitt. I drove downtown to Oakland to take a class taught by Marino Pericenzo, one of the great writers in Post-Gazette history. He was a golf writer, but he really liked my work. He gave me an A plus, my only A plus I ever got, and it was in sports
That's
writing.
great.
So I hope I'm in the right field.
You knew what you were doing, that's for sure.
I
He had the
guess.
right guy. He had the right guy. You started covering the Steelers in 1995.
Yeah.
And what's cool about that is, Coach Cowher gets the team to the Super Bowl after all those years.
Yeah.
Uh, and they beat the Colts and Jim Harbaugh in one of the most exciting finishes in, AFC Championship history and Three Rivers Stadium history. What was that season like for you covering that team? Especially Coach Cowher and getting that organization, back to that level of frenzy again.
Well, I was still at the Standard Observer, and Vic Ketchman had gone on to work for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And he got Bob Labriola's job with the Steelers, run the team paper, answer online questions, things like that. That's what Vic was doing in Jacksonville. And so I rose to become sports editor that year at the Standard Observer. And Vic had a seat on the Steelers team plane to go to games, and they pick up his hotel tab. And so you can imagine, you can imagine what it was like for me, stepping in and being told when to be at the airport, and I get my hotel comped, and then I would turn in my expenses. But we would get home Sunday night. We would leave Saturday afternoon, get home late Sunday night, and I'd have to be in the office early Monday morning to lay out the afternoon paper and edit, and I'd write my stories on the way home. So it was both a dream and, I don't want to say a nightmare, but it was a blur. It was difficult, but I was young enough to deal with the travel and all that went with that, not missing a day of work, but still hitting all the road games. And it was fantastic. You talk about that Colts game. I was still drinking and smoking back in those days, '95. I quit drinking after when they lost the Fog Bowl. When they lost the Fog Bowl to the New England Patriots, I quit smoking, and then 2 years later, I quit drinking. And so, and then I quit the newspaper. I became a freelance independent guy and started writing books and things like that. But I was in the press box when you could smoke in the press box, and we'd hung out, all the guys. We had hangovers. It was a Sunday, 1996, January. They're playing the Colts. In walked this beautiful woman in a Colts jacket. I said, she must be a cheerleader. And I see this scraggly guy walking behind her. I'm like, what is this? What is with these beautiful women and their scraggly, unkempt boyfriends? And then the unkempt boyfriend spun and saw me and started walking right at me. And I'm sitting with the group of guys smoking a cigarette. And they're smoking. We're drinking coffee, getting over our hangovers, ready for the big game coming up. And scraggly guy turns out to be John Mellencamp. And he
Wow.
says, "Could I bum a light?" And the guy next to me, Mike Byers from the Beaver County Times, says, "You got to sing a song for us, man." He goes, "For a effing light?" He didn't say effing, but I give him the lighter. And so
Right.
that was a pretty cool moment. And then it all
That
came
is great.
together. Indianapolis, he's from Indiana. He's always singing Indiana songs, right? And
Right.
so
Right.
that's the kind of life it was. You run it, especially with the Steelers. And to a degree, I mean, I just met Michael Keaton for the first time a couple months ago. He was pretty cool. It was a group. It was a group thing. We
Amazing.
were interviewing him, but that took some getting used to the star power around that team, and
Oh,
and
for
in
sure.
those big games. I mean, there haven't been the big games of late, but those kind of big games, Super Bowls, and then off to the Super Bowl we went, and I loved it. But there came a point where, you know, I got a raise for taking that job, but they didn't replace the body at the Standard Observer. The Tribune Review had bought us. It was kind of dismantling us at the same time,
Right.
and they didn't replace the body, so I had double time. You know, the people of a local paper want local news. They don't really care about the Steelers, but I was really digging covering the Steelers. So
Right, for sure.
I had to make a decision that I'm not giving these people what they deserve in far as local news. So I left the paper, doubled my salary right away. It was still in the era of newspapers and magazines, and that has since died. And so it's becoming a little more difficult. So you got to write more books, and that's what I do.
And that's it. And that was the next thing I wanted to get into. You've written some really great books on the Pittsburgh Steelers, you know, and I'd love to touch on all of them. I know we don't have enough time to do that, but you know, I have so many favorites of that group, and you know, A Tale from Behind the Steel Curtain was the first one that I actually got. The best stories of the '79 Steelers, and I wanted to get into that one right there. And one of the stories, you know, reading the whole book, there's so many great stories in that book. The story about Beasley and Jack Lambert with the snake. I mean, that is an absolute classic. Tell us about that, you know, for the fans that haven't heard it yet, because it's just, you know, every time I read it and I think of that story, it's so I mean, it's just hilarious to think that that actually happened.
Yeah, there are so many cool Jack Lambert stories in that
For
book.
sure, for
You know,
sure.
I called him. I got his number, and somebody had said, "Don't don't tell him where you got this number." That's and they also said he probably won't call you back, and he
Right,
didn't.
right,
And so everybody told me cool Jack Lambert stories, and that was we put that one on the back cover. I can't
right,
remember the specifics of the story, but he went out for the night, and they put a rubber snake under his pillow, and he freaked out when he saw it, um, and he was screaming in the hallway, screaming for
right.
Chuck, and Chuck woke up, and he put a, I think was it Beasley?
It's
Beasley
Beasley,
put
yeah.
a, you know, they put a snake in my room, and that snake is still in my room. I'm not going back in there until somebody gets that snake out. And so, you know, that all developed and finally came down on Jack, and he felt a little foolish that it was a rubber snake, right? The details of it are even better. And do you still have that book?
I do have it. I have it sitting in here. I
Well,
don't
that
have it
book's
right
out of
with me where I could reach it. It's a great book.
that book sold out, and then the publishing house, I don't know if it went out of business or mutated into a different publishing house, but the people who work there still call me for books for their publishing house. But it sold out and wasn't reproduced, and I've seen it on sale for over $400
Wow.
on used books. And I will say this. That was about the '79 Steelers and people like Jack Ham, Mike Wagner, Rocky Blyer. I know I'm going to miss some guys, but they were so helpful with that book. There were so many guys that helped me. I only had 2 months to write it. And
Wow.
sometimes when you're pressured like that, you can really turn out your best stuff. And the next year, that same publishing house wanted me to do a book called Men of Steel. And they wanted me to do 1,500 words. And the guy had to be alive. 1,500 words on where they are now. What are they doing now? What became of them? And
Right.
so I tried Jack Lambert again. Why not? I have his number. Let's just try, and maybe I'll catch him in a weak moment. You know.
Right.
Well, he didn't answer. I left message. He called me back that night. He goes, "This is Jack Lambert." I go, "Wow, I didn't expect you to call me back." He goes, "I don't normally call people like you back." He goes, "But I read your first book and I thought it was the best Steeler book ever written. So how can I help you?"
That is
So,
awesome.
you know, you talk about the great compliments of your life that you never forget. Now, I
For
know all
sure.
those stories were really cool about him, and I had such great respect for him that, I mean, even if there were stories that made him look bad, I wasn't going to do that. I just, you know, Jack Lambert, who doesn't like Jack Lambert, right? And
Exactly.
especially the mystery he's become now that he doesn't do many interviews. He doesn't come out. He doesn't return for their legend stuff. He did come back for the last game at Three River Stadium. and that was really cool. And I did interview
Right.
him then. And Greg Lloyd, at the time, Greg Lloyd was sitting at Jack's table, and I asked Jack if I could interview him. He said yes, and Lloyd got a little mouthy, and Jack Lambert just gave him a piece of mind. Said this gentleman is deserving of your respect. He's come in here to, you know. Greg's like, hey, that's cool, man. But wow,
Right.
I mean, so Jack gave me a pretty cool interview then. But he did call me back, and um, I sent him a copy of the book. Is Where Are They Now? And I told him, I said, Jack, I have enough. I just need to know what you're up to now. And he said, I mean, you're going to cut this interview short? I said, well, tell, tell me about the Raiders. Oh, the Raiders, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Then he goes in 15 minutes on the Raiders. And I go, oh, okay,
Right.
Jack. Hey, thanks a lot, man. He goes, what? You wait all this time to interview me and now you're going to hang up? I said, all right, tell me about the Browns. Oh, the fucking Browns, man. I tell
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
you go on and on about the Browns. And so I sent him a copy of the book and he writes me back. He goes, thank you for the book. I'm at my friend's house. He's having a New Year's Eve party. I'm downstairs. I just cracked open a Michelob Light, lit up a Tarrington, and thought it would be a good time to write you back. I read your book, and I still think your first book was the best Steeler book ever written. So, this book sucks, but I still like your other one. And
That's a
so
great story.
yeah, I've been trying to get him to do a biography, and he doesn't. So
That's
anyway,
a
that's
tough
my
one.
Jack Lambert. That's that book. That's what I love about that book is the Jack Lambert connection there, and also all kind of great Jack Ham stuff, and I mean all those
Oh yeah.
guys. Gary Dunn gave me some great stuff too about how he had 3 sacks on a Monday night game, and before the game they were trying to teach him to do a sack celebration. And he's I'm a nose tackle. I don't get that many sacks, but he got one. And he pumped his fist, and somebody said, you got to do better than that. He got two. And he did a little thing, and they said, no, more. So he got a third sack. And he started some ridiculous dance, pumping his fist, and he punched somebody. Oh, I forget if it was the quarterback,
Yeah,
but he
it was.
punched somebody and almost started a brawl. And it wasn't his intention. But Gary Dunn was a great storyteller, and he
Oh yeah.
went more into the 80s. He's a Tunch and Wolf guy. And so those are those 2 books. And then I realized that I wasn't making much money writing for publishing houses. And so my third book was a self-published book, a road trip book, Steeler Nation. And that
Great
sold
book.
out too. I still have a few of those copies, and I keep the price up high a little bit on my website. I sell the books. I don't have the first 2 books, but I sell these books, and I keep the price at $20, even though it's paperback, it's thin, it's from the 2007 season, and uh, but I have so few of them. It's okay if I don't sell out. I
Right.
have and that book, that was when self-published books could get into Barnes and Noble and other bookstores. Even though the
Yep.
economy crashed right at the same time the book came out, I still did really well with that. And that one and the first book, Tales from Behind the Steel Curtain, they sold about 10,000. And a self-published book selling 10,000 is nice. It's really
That
nice.
is
And
nice.
I was able to, I still have a retirement fund thanks to that book, college fund, all that stuff went in, put money into the house. And my ex-wife has, her retirement fund from that too. So that worked out well. And then my next self-published book was Polamalu, and the timing was right for that. And I had been
Right.
working on it, and then he retired and went into the Hall of Fame, but it wouldn't go into Barnes and Noble. It couldn't get a self-published book in there, and so I mean, it still sold well. But a publishing house bought the rights to the paperback to get it into Barnes and Noble. So
Okay.
yeah, that I don't know if you want to get in behind the scenes of the money, the business of books. It's kind of sad if you want to write books, but it's not easy. But I
For
still
sure.
grind away at it, and I still have a good book idea in mind. I'm going to start here in a couple weeks. So
Fantastic to hear. It is. You know what? This is about you, and your background and your successes and and us as fans being able to celebrate with you. This is this city and everybody in it, especially, writers like you. It means a lot to be able to celebrate those things, to be able to have the ability to talk to a guy who's had all these experiences and to be able to share that. I think that means the world, to be able to spread that love and the things that you did, because these books, uh, amazing. And the Polamalu book, you just mentioned that. Not only an incredible book, Wex, but a book that takes a reader into the life of one of the sport's quiet legends. He wasn't one of those guys that was, out there all the time, talking smack. He just laid it all out on the field, and it really exemplified, the compassion, that he had, family and all that. Tell us a little bit about Troy and writing that book, because I think that really it's a great read to be able
well,
into his life.
thank you, John. It's nice of you to say. The Tales from Behind the Steel Curtain book, it taught me, um, I only had 2 months to get it. And so I would call these guys and say, hey, I'm writing a book called Tales from Behind the Steel Curtain. That was the name, the formulaic name given. Each city, this book publishing house would do a book called that. So it gave the impression I was looking to dig up dirt. Who wouldn't love to get some dirt? And that's where your bestsellers come from. But I
Right.
would tell these people, I'm not looking for that. Tell me cool stories, and that would lead to Lambert stories. Uh,
Right.
so, but not just him. But when I say cool stories, I want cool football stories. I want you to tell me about the parties where Lambert got all the rookies drunk. He called it Chobe parties, and how he would show up early and sit at his locker smoking a cigarette, watching these guys who couldn't handle hangovers come in. And uh, that's cool stories. Okay, now we're not digging up dirt, but these are cool stories. And so doing the Polamalu book, you're not going to you're not going to find any dirt. I mean, I,
Right.
I and I don't mean this out of disrespect for his brother, but his older brother was taller with the same kind of quick twitch. Troy ran the 4.340, but he also had the quick twitch. I mean, that trigger, he had the hips, and he had all of that and the quick twitch. And his uncles all told me that his kids have the same. These kids are the same as Troy when they were little. So, look for the Polamalu boys to become big time athletes too. But his
Nice.
older brother had the same kind of athletic ability, but was 6'1". Troy's what, 5'10"?
Right.
So this was a 6'1" Troy Polamalu. But he got into the gangs in LA, and that's why the family moved Troy up north. So I wanted to interview the older brother. I don't know, I can't remember how hard off his life got before he saw the light, and transformed, and he had a happy ending. But I wanted to talk to him, and I wanted to talk about all that. And so he never returned my call. So when I say dig up dirt, that's the kind of about only I could figure out that would be in Troy's background that would come close to quote unquote dirt. And he never
Right.
called me back. And so we touched on him in the book, but I wasn't looking for dirt. And, when you're doing a book on Troy Polamalu, you can't expect any. I mean, he's lived a fairy tale
Right.
life. He's overcome a lot. And he says the last thing I ever stole was a Bible. Because he was
Right.
tending to in the bad direction, maybe steal some candy, stuff like that. At 9 years old, he went up to Oregon, but the last thing he ever stole was a Bible. So I mean, that's a
Right.
cool story in
No dirt
itself.
for
And
sure.
he met his wife, and that's a fairy book romance, and raising his kids. You know, there's not much you can expect. His teammates love him. I'm not looking for bad stories. And so when he would direct, I would call uncles, and they would call Troy. Who is this guy? What's he doing? What's he looking for? Oh no, he's a good guy. And so you're not going to sell 100,000 copies without dirt, right? Without some kind of scandal in there. So I
Right.
wasn't expecting it and I wasn't looking for it. And my history with Tales from Behind the Steel Curtain, I want cool football stories. Ryan Clark, Ike Taylor, Chris Hope, tell me, Deshae Townsend, tell me something cool that happened on the field. It doesn't have to be dirt, right? I mean,
That's
you
right.
like cool football stories. Tell me something funny
Right.
somebody said on a field. Tell me something, in preparation. Troy Troy's eating.
Right.
As they say, the Polynesians love their food, and Troy didn't like to come to spring practice either, like Aaron Rodgers, and he would
Right.
get out and he
Right.
would never come. It was voluntary, and sometimes he would show up, and it's like, wow, Troy, 20, 30 pounds extra. How are you going to get that off in time for training camp? And he would. He knew how to work his body, and it didn't springtime training didn't fit his process. And some
Right.
veterans have to be not coddled, they have to be recognized. They have to be treated like adults. Like, Casey
Right.
Hampton, the same thing. He knew how to get into decent shape for a nose tackle. And one time he didn't. Tomlin put him on another field. And it was kind of embarrassing. And Casey handled it. But these guys know how to take care of themselves. And so, but the eating, there were good stories about, and there were cool stories about Troy's last playoff game, against the Ravens when he knew the end was coming. He didn't really want to admit it, but the end was coming and he was hurt. He was beat up. He lost to the Ravens and he and his
Right.
family got back to Pittsburgh, and I can't remember if the game was at home, but they were driving home and they went to a restaurant, and Troy, of course, ordered too much food and they took it all with him. He had a bunch of food in the back, and they would be at a stoplight downtown, and Troy would say, "Stop the car, let me get out." He would get his food and he would go to a homeless person, start giving him food, and he would limp back to the car. And you know, the town wasn't in a very good mood after losing a playoff game to the Ravens. But here's
Right.
Troy limping back to the car after giving food to the homeless. That's a cool story in and of itself. That's
That's
Troy.
right.
That's what he was. And his uncle being in the car. Come on, Troy. Let's just go home. You don't have to do this. Troy, no, I want to. And so,
Right.
while there's no scandal, anything close to scandal in that story, it's a cool story.
It
And
is.
so you put those little nuggets together and you find more cool stories. And Troy was a very cool dude. And he really was. He was very interesting, very intelligent, and a little bit of a rebel himself. And there are all kind of cool stories like that. So while those kind of books aren't going to sell 100,000 because you're not going to be able to lean on any scandal, um, it's good football stuff, and
Right.
it keeps your relationships intact with guys who, when they say, don't please don't use this, but they would tell you something really cool, and you don't want
Right.
it used. I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to burn a relationship. There's
Exactly.
enough cool stuff. There's enough good stuff to write here that I don't need to. I'm not that hungry for money. You know, I'm
I
not going to
agree with
burn
you.
relationships.
Right. And I think that's what's got you here, the respect that these guys have for you and the town has for you. And we talk about, Polamalu and the type of person that he was. And I want to get into all of our favorite players of all time, and that's Walter Payton. I thought that, back when I was a kid, I remember hearing him saying that he bestowed that honor upon, like the Joe Delaney's and guys like that. And I said, that's my guy right there. Class act, and Troy brought that to the city of Pittsburgh too. Tell us a little bit about, Walter Payton and your thoughts on him and kind of like how it ties into to Troy.
Yeah, well, Walter was Troy's favorite player, and
Right.
he was particularly taken by Walter's approach to training, that hill. I don't know if you and your younger generation are aware of the hill Walter
Oh yeah.
used to run up, and
Yep.
I forget if it was NFL Films that brought that to the consciousness and national consciousness. But it was brutal, and Troy had a hill of his own, and his cousin showed me the hill, and I have video of it. I never, you take video just in case it becomes a movie,
Right.
and you have this kind of stuff, and it never did. So,
That's
but I
great.
remember the hill in Oregon that they showed me. It was where Troy trained, and uh, he used to study Walter Payton, more of his off the field stuff. And Troy always wanted to be a running back. And if you remember that interception return against the Ravens, or any time Troy has run, it's running over Carson Palmer at the goal line. It's always
Right.
been reckless, Walter Payton like. It's never smooth, but he had that quick twitch, and he was reckless, and he would run you over,
Right.
and that was Walter. And you know, Troy. I think there's an NFL Films video of I forget which play. There was a goal line play or a 4th and 1 play where Bill Cowher was contemplating, and Troy's nipping at his heels and getting on the video. I can score this. I can do this, Coach. I can do this. And Cowher's like, I know, Troy. I know, because he hears it all the time. Troy always
Right.
wanted
Right.
to be the 4th and 1 guy to dive over the goal line like Walter did,
Right.
but
Right.
they never let him. But they would let him. He did get to go in to be the when they take a knee, victory formation. Troy would always get to come in on victory formation. Jalen Ramsey was that guy last year.
Right.
Take
Right.
a
Right.
deep safety spot behind the quarterback in case some disaster happened. Troy would be the guy to run down the fumble recovery. So, and that's as close as Troy
Right.
got to being a running back in the NFL. But he was a running back at heart, as James Harrison will say we all were. And
Right. Right.
and
That's
James
great.
Harrison proved his running back chops at one time too. But and
No doubt about it.
just the character, Walter Payton's character, and the one thing that always bugged me a little bit, and I know I have no, it's really not my right to criticize Walter Payton, but when he should have gotten the ball in the Super Bowl. He should have gotten the ball instead of William Perry, but it didn't bother me at the time. I wasn't, as a Bears fan watching the 85 Bears in the Super Bowl, when William Perry came in, I wanted Perry to get the ball to bludgeon the Patriots for even thinking they deserved to be on the field with that team. I wanted
Right.
I wanted people to hurt. I wanted Perry to run somebody over, and so did Ditka. Ditka had that same kind of bloodlust that a fan did. And in
Right.
the end, he realized he didn't give the ball to Walter Payton. And Walter went into a closet after the game and sulked and wouldn't come out for interviews. And he had to be talked into it, I believe, by his agent. And he resented Ditka for that for a long time. And all I
Right.
could think of was why? Why are you so worried about that? Why are you This is a team thing. Your team just won a Super Bowl. Why are you pouting? So coming to and Walter, he passed away not too long after. He died young, probably from all the physical pain he took. I mean, his body took a beating. He
Right.
was one of those guys that didn't have an offensive line, but still gained 1,500 yards. By the Super Bowl, he was not the guy he was. He was still the leading rusher on that team. I think he had a lot of yards, but his yards per carry was down. He wasn't the guy he was when the Bears really sucked and they had
Right.
no line and no quarterback. So that was my only drawback of Walter. And I don't know, Troy
Right.
has that kind of, Troy resented the Steelers for a while. What they forced him into retirement, and he didn't like that. And he's come to terms with. He told them, don't call me for your legends thing. And he took a Jack Lambert type stance, but he has come back every now and then. I believe his mood is lightened. Um,
Right.
I asked him if his kids are developing into the player he was, like his uncles predicted, and he said they didn't have the same kind of edge I did growing up. I
Right.
said, isn't that, as a parent, isn't that make you happy? He goes, absolutely. But I don't know if that's going to give them the drive that they need, because you need that kind of edge, that hunger. And when you're
Right.
raised in Troy Polamalu's mansion, with loving parents, I don't know that you have the edge, the cutting edge insanity that Troy must have had
That's
growing
right.
up and forging his way into the NFL.
Yeah, it's that's amazing. That's amazing stories right there. You know, to hear that
You know,
background.
John, not everything is in the books. I still think of things that have happened to me, my dealings with the players. As you get older, your memory tends to reflect back 10 years more so than yesterday. And not that I'm
Right.
losing, not that I'm gaining any dementia, but
I know what you mean though.
I'll remember a James Harrison story before I'll remember who's in his locker right now. I can't even remember who's in his locker right now. Oh, Jack Sawyer. Jack Sawyer's in his locker now. I was
Right.
interviewing Jack Sawyer last spring, and he's telling me how I think his dad was a Steelers fan. I go, you know whose locker you're in? Who? And I said, James Harrison. He goes, really? And I told him a James Harrison story. Jack Sawyer's a really cool dude. And so I'm
Great
hoping
player.
he becomes a great player to, become a go-to guy. He can be one of those interesting interviews, but to get interviewed, you have to do something first, right on the field. And I'm not
That's
saying
right.
he's not there, but he's behind Nick Herbig, so he's number 4 right now, and he's still a long way down there.
Right.
But and the other thing, Jalen Warren, while everybody, I talked to Jalen Warren about being born in Clinton, North Carolina. I said, man, do you know Willie Parker? He goes, he's my cousin. So, and then
Oh, that's amazing.
when he made the team, I wrote that story, and then everybody knew that he was uh, cousins with Willie Parker. And then he made the team, and they rearranged the lockers for when all the guys are cut. Then they rearranged the new guy's locker. They put him in Willie Parker's locker, and Rodgers Freivogel, the equipment manager, isn't there anymore. So I don't know. I think it was just a coincidence. I don't know that anyone knew it was his cousin's locker. I told
That's
Jalen,
great.
nobody else knew that. I'm that old. I've been around that long. I don't feel old, right? But there's such a young crop of reporters. They don't know where Willie Parker lockered. I told
No,
Jalen, your cousin was in this exact same locker, and he thought that was really cool. And then
that
when
is cool.
he re-signed, he was re-signed. I looked for the last running back to get a second contract with the Steelers because Najee Harris didn't.
Right.
Um, you just look back, Mendenhall didn't. Um, Willie Parker did. The last running back to get a second contract with the Steelers. I said, hey, Jalen, do you know who the last running back in this team to get a second contract? He goes, he knows me. He just looks at me and goes, Willie? I said, yeah. So, that kind of stuff. Jalen and I have a bond. I mean, he's not going to tell me behind the scenes stuff that's going to hurt his team or his teammates, or he's not going to give away that kind of stuff, but there's a
Right.
bond there. So that kind of experience and longevity as a reporter helps in that regard. And I have a bond with Jack Sawyer. Just, I told him we did a little James Harrison. I told him about James Harrison's story one time trying to interview James. He was a tough nut, right? And I said, yeah, well, he's from Ohio. You know about those linebackers from Ohio. You just never know. And that Jack is a linebacker from Ohio, right?
Right. Right. Right.
And so we started talking about linebackers from Ohio. I said, there's another Jack who played linebacker here. It was from Ohio, Jack
That's right.
Lambert.
Right. Right. Right.
And so so Jack Sawyer, we got to bond on a little below the surface stuff, and I think he's now could trust me a little bit more, so I can go to him once he starts playing more. There's a bit of a bond, not much, but I'm just saying that's how it kind of snowballs throughout the career of a
Right.
journalist.
You have to build that trust, and then the guys start opening up, and they, I'm sure they I mean when they see all the reporters out there, they know eventually, they build that trust. They know, hey, like this guy I'll talk to, but this one, I don't. Is that
I
what it's kind of
guess.
like?
Yeah, I mean, Najee Harris for whatever reason hated my guts, and I hate to use the word hate. I won't use the word hate,
Right.
but the feeling was pretty close to mutual. And and I wasn't the only one. He just did not like a lot of people, and
Right.
it doesn't always go your way. I mean, the bond is impossible, and Najee got along with others, so
Right.
it was me. There's an old saying: 20% of the people hate your face, 20% of the people love your face. You can't,
Right.
you don't know, and you don't get a job or something, and you're like, wow, he must be in that 20%, So, and it's not you, it's just how
Right.
life is. 20% of the people are not going to like you. 20% of the people are going to like you for no good reason. They're just, and the other
Right.
60% really don't care. So,
That's a great breakdown too.
I'll go with that. And yeah, so the key is to find your 20%.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
exactly it.
Stay away from the 20% that hate you.
I wanted to get into to Craig Wolfley. You know, one of your closest. I know the rapport that you guys had. I'd watched the podcast and things, and we lost Wolf in 2025. I love what he brought to the game because I thought he had that. I mean, a cool, like a funny aspect to it too. I love the way he did it. And you were part of if these walls could talk, behind the scenes of what it took to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. Tell us about Wolf and what he was like, from your perspective.
Well, I tell you, if there are 20% that hate Craig Wolfley, I don't want to be anywhere near any of them.
Right.
I mean, see, I just tell you that my 2020 60 thing, that don't stand for Wolfley. I mean, I like 90%, 95% love him, and the other 5% don't know him or never met him. I mean, what you saw is what you get. So I'm not going to be able to tell you anything new. What you saw is what you would see up close if you got to talk to him. If he was on your podcast, I mean, when you say we had a great bond, it's only because you saw us. Wolfley had a great bond with everybody.
Yeah.
And so you hope to achieve that. And I somebody on Facebook wrote about Aaron Rodgers, somebody I know and like, and I ripped him for his take. And he texted me, says, "What's up, man? I got respect for you. Why are you ripping me like that?" And I thought, man, what's wrong with me? You know, Craig Wolfley, and so I think of Craig. How would Craig have done it? Everybody says, how would Jesus have handled it? What's that? What would Jesus have done? What
What
would
would
Jesus?
Jesus do? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I never met Jesus. I'd do that with Craig Wolfley. What would Craig Wolfley do?
Right.
He's a follower of Christ, right? So,
Right.
and he
Right.
he reads more Bible than I do, so he knows more about Christ. I just read Wolfley's If These Walls Could Talk. So I'm going to follow Wolfley and I'm going to say, what would Wolfley do? And that's what I did in this instance. And Craig would have, he would have written some great apology. I don't know what I was thinking. I had a bad day. I have a lot of respect for you. I didn't write that. Craig would have. So
Right.
I still can't live up to what Craig does, but he's in my mind a lot. How would Craig have handled that? Craig would have handled it
Right.
with love. I mean,
Right.
that's a guy who's one of the he was in the world's strongest man competition in his 20s.
Right.
Those kind of guys, they're not small like I have a tendency to be at times. And you saw me arguing with umpires. Craig Wolfley would have said, "Sir," Craig would have made the umpire feel bad because Craig treated it with respect, whereas I'm screaming and the umpire is just going to hate me
Right.
more
Right.
because of the approach I'm taking.
Right.
So I can't get to that level. I'm 65. I'm trying to get to that level. I'm still trying to grow. And so Craig is I don't want to say idol is not the right word, but a model, a mentor
Right.
in life. And so I don't think I need to tell you any stories. I think what you see is exactly who he is, kind of like with Troy Polamalu. You don't
Right.
need me to to tell you any more. I mean, Craig was just a great guy. I could take my troubles to Craig at lunch. And he'd say, Wex, you know you're wrong about this. You know, and I would say, I know, Craig, come on, man, take my side for once.
He kind of
And
balanced you.
but he would make you feel loved and at the same time correct you. And that's how he was as a writer. That's why I loved him on my site. Whereas people look at me as more of an optimist with the Steelers, and I will criticize, but Craig could take that optimist role without being looked at as carrying water for the team or whatever, apologists, whatever insults. Those insults hurt me because it 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 tries to trash everything I've done as a reporter through the years. It's, well, you're just doing this for the team. And I'm not. I'm just more optimistic. I have a lot of respect for how team is run. I thought
Right.
Mike Tomlin was a great coach, and I would have brought him back. And when Art Rooney too said that, Art Rooney too took a lot of abuse for that, saying he would have brought Tomlin back. And I respect how the Rooneys run things. Um, I was trying to get a job with Steelers.com. I didn't get it, but I still have a lot of respect for how that franchise is run. That's not going to change me. And Craig could Craig could write a column with criticism, but it was couched as a good coach. John, you may have thought I was a good coach to you, but I was more of a holler guy. I may have embarrassed you at a time or two, where Craig would never do that. A good coach, a really good coach, criticizes as a teaching tool. He's not trying to embarrass you into, whereas, and I may have done it with my daughter too, challenge them through embarrassment, maybe. It's not something I would be proud of, but you still have respect for me, and so maybe I didn't embarrass you to the point where you hated me. But Craig just had pure love all the time, and it was he would criticize as a really good coach would, to show you how you can do it better. And instead of embarrassing you, Vince Lombardi would embarrass you. Bobby Knight would embarrass you
Right.
and you'd love him later because it jolted you into doing it the right way. And you would do it the right way, and then you would look fondly. Craig had that love in him that I still aspire to, as and I still do it with guys who write for me. I will take it, and I'll criticize them too thoroughly, maybe, and then try to get them back through love later. Whereas I should do it with love to begin with. It's just difficult. So you're always growing,
Right.
always growing.
There was one last thing I want to tell you, man. I could talk to you all day, believe me, Wex. I got so many things listed here. I was like, boy, I could get into this, this, and this. Your take on the 2026 Steelers. I mean, obviously the transition from Tomlin to McCarthy, we're looking at, some decent changes here. You're looking at a guy that's a, Pittsburgh guy, offensive minded coach. What's your take on a team, for 2026? I mean, they have all the tools. Is this a team that you think can get over the hump this year, in your opinion?
Well, Tomlin, excuse me, John. Tomlin took a lot of grief for not being able to win while rebuilding. And part of it was his fault, part of it was Ben's fault. They were too good to bottom out. He was too good of a coach, Ben was too good of a quarterback to
Right.
bottom out. But and they couldn't rebuild like everybody else does, except for Belichick. Might have been the greatest coaching job. He
I
rebuilt
agree.
and continued winning. He still had the quarterback, but I still got to give the coach and that franchise credit for continuing to rebuild and win Super Bowls for a long time.
Amazing.
Um, Tomlin would rebuild the offensive line. He would get DeCastro, Gilbert, Pouncey. Now the line is big time. Ramon Foster. I didn't use him because he was a free agent, undrafted free agent. They used high draft capital to rebuild that line. Meanwhile, the defense was dying from that Super Bowl team, and They got Antonio Brown in the 6th round and Le'Veon Bell in the second or third. I think he was a second rounder.
Second, yep.
So they got the triplets. They had the line, but the defense needed rebuilt. Okay, so draft Ryan Shazier, draft Stephon Tuitt. You lose both of them. Uh, you draft an Artie Burns. You reach for a corner. It just never happened because they didn't bottom out. And there was always
Exactly.
something that wasn't, the secondary was a disaster through the late 2010s. And now I
Right.
think they finally got that secondary intact. I'm looking for Ramsey. I'm looking for Jamel Dean. Plus, there's real
Right.
depth in the secondary.
For
And
sure.
there's real depth on the defensive line. There's real depth on the offensive line. They needed playmakers. They got a couple. If they get an injury, the playmakers are wide receivers are still going to be shallow. But they've got, it's been Omar's nightmare, and Tomlin's, So I think they got to the point where they can do it, and Tomlin's out. I think Tomlin could have really done really well with this team, and Mike McCarthy is going to give them more punch offensively, and he's going to hopefully rebuild the quarterback position. I'm not so sure. Drew Aller doesn't look good.
Right.
I'm going to give him time because he's totally rebuilding his fundamentals. And let the coach do his, you know, me criticizing Drew Aller is pretty stupid at this point. I'm just telling you, it doesn't look good from my seat in the spring of his rookie year. But you've got a
Right.
quarterback whisperer who's working with him, which they didn't have with Tomlin. So that's going to help. And then Aaron
Yep.
steps into his old offense with playmakers, with an offensive line that I think is finally totally rebuilt. Just because you have a hiccup with Broderick Jones and you probably, you know, didn't draft the great player there, and now he's injured, you still got
Right.
a Honachur. And so I think the offensive line is going to be fine. So while it's easy to say you can't win a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers, I mean, it's easy to say that, but I think there's a sliver in me
Right.
that says you can. It's possible. And
Right.
you have to have everything come together, and this team has to be injury free. But I think it can because he has
I
weapons,
agree.
because he has a line, because I think he's going to have a better running game and a better defense.
Right.
And the
That's right.
offensive minded coach is going to help. Now, when things go wrong, everybody says Thursday night in Cleveland after playing the Ravens at home and beating the Ravens and losing Thursday night in Cleveland to say they're 1-12 is a Tomlin thing. Guess what? It's an NFL thing. And people are so
It
used
is.
to Tomlin for how many years? 18, 19 years
Right.
that they're going to say, wow, this McCarthy, he's not winning in Cleveland either after 4 days rest, beating a division rival in a big game, and then 4 days later going to Cleveland to play a 1-10 team. It's their Super Bowl. It's just how the NFL is. It wasn't Tomlin.
Right.
Every team loses to bad teams. So I think fans are going to find that out. And can Mike McCarthy keep this team together the way Tomlin did in bad moments? He could keep that locker room together. Um,
Right.
I have a feeling McCarthy will be able to, and McCarthy will add some offensive punch to it. He's got a new defensive coordinator with some ideas. It's going to be the same scheme, but it'll be interesting to see this defense. And they filled in some holes. The secondary, I'm really excited about the secondary and the defensive line. Derek Harmon's second year, Y.A. Black second year. Um,
Yep.
what are they going to do with Benton? Are they going to continue to have him rush the passer as a nose tackle? 6.5 sacks is great for a nose tackle, but he's also getting pushed back into the linebacker in the run game. What
That's
will
right.
what will come of that? Cam Hayward still got it. Still have four outside linebackers. Exciting. So I'm excited. And I think they can. The win total, my guy has 8. I've heard nationally it's 8.5. In Pittsburgh, there's so little belief in this team that it's 8. I like that. I took the over. I,
I like it too.
I'm excited about this team from an underrated point of view where they're going to surprise a lot of people. That's in my opinion.
I think it's a great take on it too. Well, in closing, Wex, I want to say thank you. for doing what you do, not only from the media side, but like I said, for me as a person, like I said, that being on that team with your dad stepping into as well, and all the guys, Bird, and the people that coached it, it meant a lot, for a 15-year-old coming in, to life, to experience that, not only the way we won, but the way we built it as a team. And I really
Yeah.
credit you for that. I thank you for that. And thank you for doing the great writing that you do for the Steelers and us as fans. So everybody that's listening out there, make sure you look up Wex, follow him, get the books because it's some great writing. It's you got a fan here, you know that.
I appreciate it, John. I appreciate all that stuff, especially that life stuff. That really somebody Kenny Kinzel, one of your coaches. I saw Kenny in
Yep.
the
Oh yeah.
gym, and he said he saw what you wrote about me, and he said, "Man, that must make you feel good." I said, "It does." When the ex-players come back, and it happens quite a bit. We had a lot of great guys. We had great teams, and so they're
Right.
fond memories, and from the players too. And I wasn't that much older than you guys, so
Right.
that
Right.
that helped me bond with you guys.
For sure.
And the late Joe Stewart was another coach. I don't. You must not have
Great
played
guy.
with Mike Lawfer. Do you remember Mike
He was
Lawfer?
he was right before he was the team before the year
Okay,
before.
because he wrote to me.
Yep.
He texted me. He said, "Who's John Marhefka? I don't remember him." He said he played for you. I said, "Oh yeah, John. I guess you weren't on Lawfer's team, but
Yeah, I
so
wasn't.
yeah." But anyway, I'm looking at those jerseys behind you. I see number 40. Is that Gale Sayers?
Gale Sayers,
Now, that was my first guy. That
for
was
sure.
when I was a kid. I was a baby. And Sayers and Butkus. And 95 is Greg Lloyd.
Greg Lloyd. Yep. Got
And
Greg Lloyd. I got
56 is LT,
Lawrence
right?
Taylor.
Yeah.
Yep. Got the helmets behind me. James Ferrier right here.
So did Sayers autograph that?
He did. I got a
Okay.
good story for this one too. I bought there's a company that does they have like these mystery boxes. I don't know if you've seen them. You could buy a mystery jersey and it was like $35 at the for this mystery jersey piece. This was like right around Christmas time a few years ago. And you could get anybody. I mean, they had a list of like all these players. So I remember coming home from work that day and I got mine. I opened it up. It's Gale Sayers. I mean, you couldn't even imagine, how ecstatic I was. I said, "Oh, I can't believe this." But that's
I
it.
can't believe you haven't given it to me for properly thanking me for coaching you. No, I'm teasing.
I would
I'm glad we could do a podcast with that. Sayers was, he was my guy. And of course, Butkus was too. Whatever I wanted to be that day, defense or offense, they were my guy.
great players. Absolutely great players. And that was like us with the Steelers of the 70s, I'd go out and I was Lynn Swan one day,
Yeah.
always Swanee or Stallworth. But on defense, Lambert, or I was Ham, or playing in the defensive backfield, Mel Blunt. He just those those stories, and that's why I like talking to you about those stories, because it brings up great memories, because people tie those memories into childhood and growing up, and it means a lot to become the person that you become. It's a great thing. It really
Yeah,
is.
yeah. Well, that's why I got into sports writing as opposed to covering news where you have to write about tragedies. It's nice to write about,
Right.
that was the one thing Marino Pericenzo taught me the most about sports writing. Uh, Spirit. You got to have spirit. And so maybe that's contributed to my reputation as being optimistic and maybe more pro team.
Right.
I mean, I do get critical, as you know, but
Right.
finding spirit. That's what was cool about covering high school sports. Or covering when I used to write for Post Gazette in their zone. It would be a feature on Scott Barniak comes to mind because he saw me at an event and he showed me an old clip of something I wrote about him. You look for something, there's always something, especially like these pro players, whatever undrafted free agent. There's some spirit in there, their high school and their college. There's a great story in there somewhere if you lift it up. And you can write with spirit about somebody's life that makes the reader feel good for a minute, even though it's
No
about
doubt.
somebody else. But that spirit, team wise, winning, coming together as a team, sacrifice, People love that stuff, and that's what sports writing should be all about.
Totally agree. Totally agree. 1,000%. Well, in closing, I want to say thanks, Wex, again.
All right, John. Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate all the kind words, and I hope the listeners enjoyed all the talk. I was a little too much about myself, but I hope it was worthwhile.
I definitely think so. I think I wanted this to be about you, your life, your career, and with the stories of the Steelers and everything. I think it ties in to to what I want this to be about with this podcast. I want it to be about the history of the game, obviously the legends of the game, but also the people that helped to build the game, to what it is. It's not just, the players and the coaches and the things people see, you know, in their face. It's the people behind the scenes
Yeah.
that bring this to us, and it means a lot. So I really appreciate that.
I really like Aaron Rodgers, always mentions those guys. Oh, the assistant equipment manager that brings me coffee every day, man. That's one of the reasons I came back to Pittsburgh. When he says stuff like that, I'm
Right.
43 years old. Experience has taught him a lot, but he's cool that way. Anybody that talks crap on him, I'm looking forward to another year covering Aaron Rodgers. Now I got to get down there today. I'm interviewing Jason Simmons, their
Oh
secondary
man,
coach.
great.
I told you I liked the secondary, and Jason Simmons I used to cover, used to play. He was a nickel. He was drafted in the fifth round, right behind Deshae Townsend in '98. So I want to get
Right.
Jason Simmons' take. He's now become a pretty good defensive coach in the league. Steelers just hired him. McCarthy just brought him in. So I'm going to go get some spirit from Jason Simmons.
That's awesome.
I
I
got to
can't wait
run,
to hear it.
John. Thanks for having
All
me
right,
on,
Wex.
buddy.
Thanks for
Here,
being
bud.
on. Thank you so much. See you, Wex.